You know, life just keeps happening.
Mm.
If you've listened to this podcast the past couple of times, you know that I bump my head. And it should have been a little thing. But sometimes when you bump your head, it's a bigger thing. So I am going through what they call very dramatically traumatic brain injury. That sounds big, doesn't it? I hope it's not as big as it sounds, but I wanted to tell you what happened on Sunday. I went to a PETA event, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. Every year, there's something in New York that highlights all the wonderful progress that PETA has made in the past year on behalf of other than human beings. And this year, they were talking about the entire PETA history from 1980, and it was so impressive. We've made such strides. They hardly do any cosmetic testing on animals anymore in this country or in the UK or in the EU. And I remember when we used to have to make blush out of Crisco and food coloring. So we've gotten rid of so much animal abuse in circuses and roadside zoos and even experimentation in the pharmaceutical industry and in the military. So there was a lot of great stuff to share on Sunday. But because I have this bump on the head, I wasn't sure how long I could stay. So I was looking at the room for a seat near the back, and there was one. But seated next to that empty seat was somebody famous, James Cromwell. Now, it's a little bit intimidating to go up to somebody famous and say, "Can I sit here?" But that was the one seat. And he said the seat was available. And I said, "Thank you, because I have a concussion." He said, "I've had one too." And we started talking about his bicycle accident and telling concussion stories and a couple of concussion jokes. Who knew they existed? And then I reminded him that some years ago, he did a lot of work with my husband on the screenplay Miss Liberty, which is a feature film about a cow that escapes from a slaughterhouse. Well, that was a while ago, and we're still working on it. A little bit embarrassing to still be working on it, but when you've got a project that takes $3 million of other people's money, it's sometimes not a slam dunk. He was so understanding and so happy that we were still working on it and so supportive. And what the moral of that says to me is whenever there is an empty seat, and you can translate that however you like, it's got your name on it, step up and take it.
Lovely. Gosh, that's an amazing story. And yes, isn't it interesting? They sometimes say, don't meet your heroes, but not all, it doesn't always hold true, does it?
This is true.
And
Well,
don't worry about time. It took Rodin 20 years to sculpt the gates of hell. 20
Yes.
years.
this is all
So
good. Well,
Yes.
thank you. Thank you. And guess what? I'm talking with two more major celebrities in my life this morning. So, hi, everybody. Morning, afternoon, evening, or late night, wherever it is and whenever it is where you are. This is, by the way, the Main Street Vegan Podcast, and I am Victoria Moran. And my wonderful guests today that you're seeing on the screen if you're watching on YouTube, and you've already heard their voices if you're listening, are um, Dr. Frank Sabatino and Jayney Goddard. Now, they are partners in life. I hope I'm allowed to say that. And they are also mentors of mine in the world of health and also in the world of spirituality, because where I come from, those two things are very, very closely connected. So I'll start with the lovely Jayney Goddard to introduce her. She has all kinds of letters after her name. I'll give you a couple of them. MSC and PGDIPED. Oh my goodness, there's a lot. She's founder and president of the Complementary Medical Association, CMA, a leading UK-based standards setting body for complementary and integrative medicine. a longtime plant-based advocate and regular contributor to the international natural health community. Jayney writes for her own platforms and the wider press. And she has one of my favorite books in the world. You want to give us a shout out on your book title?
Sure, thanks, Victoria. That's really kind. It's called Rewind Your Body Clock, and the subtitle is The Complete Natural Guide to a Happier, Healthier, Younger You.
And it works. I mean, that's one of those that I go back to. You got your books that you read, and then you got your books that are like, the Bible or how we used to use encyclopedias. You go back and back and back.
Oh, thank you.
And then also with us today is my complete health mentor. I don't do a thing that has to do with my body or my body mind connection without talking to this man. Now, I'm hoping that one day he won't say, Victoria, excuse me, it's enough. He hasn't said that yet. So I'm very, very grateful. Dr. Frank Sabatino is a vegan chiropractic physician of 50 years. He also holds a PhD in neuroendocrinology and cell biology. He's director of health education for the National Health Association and president of the International Association of Hygienic Physicians, specializing in fasting care. Science and research consultant for the Complementary Medical Association and director of the Healthful Living Ocean Retreat in Deerfield Beach, Florida. Now, we're going to put all the URLs for all that kind of stuff in the show notes at mainstreetvegan.com. I'll be talking about them a little bit later too, if you've got your little pencil. But Healthful Living Ocean Retreat, Deerfield Beach, Florida. Put this on your list. Put this on your list for the coming year. Put this on your bucket list for your life. I have been there 3 times, I think now, maybe 4. It is a life reset. It is a turnaround. You're right on the beach. You're surrounded by beauty and calmness, incredible food, superb information, and one-on-one with Dr. Frank Sabatino, which is absolutely priceless. So welcome to you
Well,
both.
thank you so much for having me. Thank you. I appreciate it so much. We might want to mention the book waitlist too, because
Oh, that's right.
yeah, because it has, I think it's very important now, especially with this resurgence of weight loss drugs and a lot of this craziness that goes on with weight loss. So I think it's more pertinent now than ever.
Well, and it's a wonderful book. I don't approve of most weight loss books because my history is that I came through obesity, I came
Right.
through compulsive eating. My dad was a physician who kind of veered into being a diet doctor. I mean, it was just complex history. And in my own recovery, I've come to see that so few people really understand the psychology of someone with food issues. And Dr. Frank does, and the book is beautiful, Weightless, Compassionate Weight Loss for Life. So we'll again put all the links for all those things. So since we brought up that topic, let's just jump in on that topic. So we've got all these drugs that are making a lot of people really happy and really content. And as somebody was saying to me the other day, I found what I need and it doesn't have a higher power in it, because people who know me know that my recovery includes a 12-step program. So a higher power is really important. And God bless anybody that finds what helps them. But I'm a little wary of drugs just as a general classification of stuff. So, Dr. Frank, jump in, tell us what we need to know.
Well, there's two things that come to mind. One is when we look at weight loss, we tend to focus on body weight, when in fact that's the least important risk factor of the story, because the most important risk factor is body fat. And many weight loss approaches do not really do that. I mean, studies out of Finland show that you could be normal weight and incredibly obese, having high body fat. So that's one piece. We still tend to kind of do this reductionist approach of anything that can rapidly take weight off seems to be the holy grail, so to speak, in people's minds. The other thing is the drugs that are constructed have a number of major potential adverse effects of everything ranging from thyroid cancer to pancreatitis to kidney dysfunction, on and on. And here's the kicker. The drugs are designed to mimic a peptide that is actually produced by the body itself. Glucagon-like peptide 1 is produced by the body itself. So semaglutide, Ozempic, they're really built to, in a sense, mimic what the body itself is producing. So a good question that comes to mind is, if the body itself is producing it, is there something that we can do normally, naturally, to kind of accentuate the body's own production of this drug that has now gotten this heyday of popularity? And it turns out that we can. It so happens that when you're eating whole food diets, plant-based diets that are high in fiber, you're supporting the microbiome, the bacteria flora that lives in the body, and especially to a great extent in the large bowel. And when those organisms are supported by high fiber food, they literally help the body produce and release that compound from your own intestine. So by actually eating the kind of diet that we typically recommend, you're accentuating the body's ability to produce the very drug that will control appetite and do all the things that GLP-1 drugs do without any of the adverse effects. So why not move in the direction of a more compassionate way of living and eating and get the bonus of all of the chemistry that will promote long-term weight regulation?
And yet, why don't people understand this? I heard RFK Jr. speaking in a way that seemed very compassionate about trying to get these drugs out to people at no cost or a very affordable cost because, in his view, they're so important and can be so helpful. So,
It's
what's
distracting people.
everybody missing?
It's distracting people away from what's really important, which is revamping your direction of food choices and agricultural practices and so many things that will not only benefit your own personal weight loss, but it'll benefit every creature in the planet itself. Why not take advantage of living in a way where your own cells, they're called L cells in the distal part of the large bowel, they will produce and release GLP. It'll travel to the brain. It'll control appetite. It'll do all the things that the drugs do. And now you don't have the adverse effects, but we're still always looking for that magic bullet and quick fix. And I understand the dance. You've been on that dance. I've watched this dance for decades. And as much as we kind of evolve over time, we still get no closer to looking at a way to get away from that roller coaster of quick fix. And then, of course, celebrities do it and they become the model for body image. And it goes back to so many other features that are tied into the psychology and even the spirituality of the process.
Yes. So, Janie, you
Mm,
live in the UK.
yes.
How are things over there? Just give us Yanks some idea of, are these weight loss drugs big in the UK as well? What else
Huge.
is going
Yes.
on in
Well,
terms
I
of
mean, let's not
medicine and
forget. Yes, exactly. It's a really important question, Victoria. So let's not forget that actually it was Denmark, it was Novo Nordisk is the company that really pioneered GLP-1s. And so, yes, they have hit Europe big time. It's interesting, actually, because the UK, we're slightly different in many ways to mainstream Europe. And of course, all of the countries in mainstream Europe are all very different from each other. However, the UK, trend-wise, seems to follow the USA more than mainland Europe. So as a consequence, we've seen this massive increase in obesity right across the board, not just in adults, but in children as well. And so it's not surprising that, people here are jumping on this bandwagon. You can get GLP-1s prescribed free on the NHS if you have a certain BMI. And this is a problem, actually, really just categorizing things. I suppose they have to have some sort of measurement, but at the moment it's a BMI rather than a body fat percentage, which would make a lot more sense because then you'd be able to also help out the skinny obese people, as they're called,
Right.
the people who look as though they have a relatively slim body type. However, they are actually holding on to a lot of adipose tissue, whether it's visceral visceral fat or whether it's abdominal fat or what have you. So yeah, we see the same thing here. You can also now we're not a country, as you know, Victoria, that really has much in the way of privatized medicine. You can get private medical insurance, but it's not ubiquitous. But you can, pay for these online. You can go through a very spurious kind of medical questionnaire and then get these things prescribed for you for considerable money out of your own pocket. So it really is both ways. But it's interesting what Frank was saying, wasn't it, about, we've got a quick fix culture. I think the problem is anybody who is suffering with obesity will argue that they've tried everything, but nothing has been successful. So I have every sympathy with a person who looks at this and says, oh, well, it worked for Serena Williams, it worked for Oprah, it worked for, this person, and this person. But I think there's also something more sinister going on, which is that whenever we see attacks on female rights, on women's rights, and women's rights being eroded politically, it correlates, this movement correlates with requiring women to be thinner, weaker, more feeble, arguably. And so I think there's a lot more to unpack, even politically, with this whole situation that's actually going on at the moment. Anytime women are sort of on the ascendant, the flip side is that yeah, you'll see something, whether it's, the heroin chic from the sort of the 90s, or, any time throughout history, we can always look back at that correlation. And we're seeing it now. In fact, looking at some of the red carpets in the US at the Oscars and all of your red carpet events not so long ago, we're seeing stars who are being described as being toned, but actually they're not. They are extremely thin. I mean, worryingly thin. Demi Moore is one to just mention at the moment, because there are a lot of photographs of her. And various others, we know who they all are. So I think it's incredibly worrying. I think it's actually really very sinister. And yes, we are seeing exactly the same thing here.
So let's talk a little bit more about the comparisons of our two countries. I
Yes.
know that when I met Dr. Frank back in the early 80s, or maybe it was even the late 70s, it, there weren't medical doctors in the vegan movement. We didn't have the term plant-based then. And now we have a lot of them, which I think is wonderful, because if we're going to get out into the world, we need to be a very big camp. And I think a lot of respect in the general world comes from having these very committed and wonderful medical doctors with us. But I also think we've lost something of the complementary medical, complementary healthcare vision, which you guys carry so brilliantly. So, Jayney, we'll start with you. What's the complementary medicine landscape like in the UK? And then Dr. Frank will look over here and also try to pull apart for people the difference between lifestyle medicine and functional medicine. I think a lot of people are confused. So, Jayney,
Yes, I
what's
think
going on
yes.
over there?
Sure. Well, actually, it's very healthy. So my organization, the Complementary Medical Association, is really huge here, but we have a global membership. We have many members in the US who will be, as soon as this goes out, well, I'll let them know that they too can tune in. So over here, I think it's fair to say that we're very, very, very lucky with a lot of the doctors who are mainstream media medics, for want of a better word. Very sadly, of course, we lost poor Dr. Michael Mosley, who was a huge advocate for lifestyle interventions that improve health. So he wouldn't have called it complementary medicine or integrative, but he was constantly on television talking about improve your sleep, improve your diet, improve your exercise. And he was giving these wonderful, wonderful programs with real empirical data, which was always fantastic. But we've also got superstars like Ranjan Chatterjee and various others. I mean, I get a lot of media coverage myself with my messaging. So we're very lucky. And I mean, let's not forget also, because of our European, technically being Europe and our European neighbors, these are situations, for example, where in France, doctors train in homeopathic medicine as well as their conventional medicine. So when you go to a doctor in France, you may well find that you're walking out not for a prescription for antibiotics, but for a prescription for a homeopathic or even a herbal medicine. In Germany, you have Heilpraktikers who are very much on a par with naturopathic doctors as you have in the US. So, we're very, very lucky. And the funny thing here, I think, is that because we're a smaller society, I think we're quite fortunate in our sector that you can get messaging out to people very, very quickly. So, for example, when I was last in the US and Frank and I were doing a fantastic road trip all the way down to the Keys, I ended up having to do an interview for the Times. So, so not the New York Times. We just call it the Times because it looks after all of the UK. But a huge, massive readership. Before, a week before that, I was doing an interview for a woman's glossy magazine with several million readers. These things are huge. They go out, they are read. And we're getting double page spreads, triple page spreads talking about complementary and integrative medicine. But I think the reason why the Complementary Medical Association and why my messaging has done very well and been so accepted is because we're really careful to really establish and talk about the evidence base. What do the data actually say when it comes to either a nutritional intervention or sleep or exercise or whatever it is? So the fact is that where the skeptics, the professional skeptics, used to throw rocks at us going, no, it's all woo-woo and you people are charlatans, they really don't have a leg to stand on now, Victoria, because, we're backing every single thing up with really strong data. So I think that's helped tremendously.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Frank, bring us over here. For
Well,
people
you
who
could see
can't call you every time something hurts, what are they supposed to
well,
do?
you could see what kind of celebrity Janie is. So we go on trips. I'm kind of like her roadie. I carry the bags, you know what I mean? Well, she does these international interviews, and and I kind of hide in the corner, which is fine. I like that spot anyway. Look, I think it's been a remarkable evolution to see this burgeoning interest in lifestyle medicine, meaning that understanding the impact that simple and profound lifestyle choices can have on improving the quality of life and health. But I like to remind people that, lifestyle medicine, long before lifestyle medicine, there was a much more important philosophical framework that we called natural hygiene, which actually, going back to the 40s and 50s, when people like Shelton and William Esser and those people, they were promoting the same kind of mentality, except they had a real philosophical framework. The problem I have with some of lifestyle medicine is that while that has become an interesting evolution to understand that, yes, if we move more and eat better and create emotional poise and stress management, this is going to improve life. There's still, within the context of those practitioners, not a philosophical framework. There's still a mentality of a curing mentality. There's still an idea of a disease entity kind of model. When we look at the foundation of things like hygiene, one of the strong suits was understanding that healing is a process that is constantly on the job. It never stops doing its thing, like the earth spinning on its axis. But to promote health outcome, there were basic biological requirements that had to be incorporated. And those, of course, were eating well, moving more, restorative sleep, all the things that are part of lifestyle medicine. But the mentality is that when you did not incorporate those things into your life, you would deviate from a state of balance that would be a lack of ease or dis-ease. And in the process of doing that, there would be an interference with normal function. There can be an interference with elimination, excretion, retention of toxic waste, and then there would be a threat to the system. And then the body would respond to that within the context of its own wisdom to kind of restore balance and normality. And it would set in motion actions that became, in the medical profession, diseases. So instead of seeing those responses as the remedial action of an intelligent system rectifying itself and moving toward a state of balance, they became disease entities that needed to be attacked by medication, surgery, and the like. So that disease entity model, unfortunately, in some ways, is still part of a philosophical framework, even within the context of lifestyle medicine. It kind of reverts, it defaults to that model. So if somebody has a fever in response to an infection, that's not something that needs to be attacked or somehow modified or eliminated. It needs to somehow be nurtured so that the body can create the environment that allows healing to express and manifest. So I love the evidence base. I love everything that's happening. I just really kind of raise an eyebrow when it sounds like, lifestyle medicine, we finally arrived, when this is a model that's been going on for half a century with more of a philosophical framework that I believe needs to be brought into the lifestyle medicine arena. But having all of these, and of course, when a medical doctor embraces that way of living, it's as if manna fell down from heaven, when in fact there were many physicians of various schools that were promoting those models and ideas for centuries, actually, from the 19th century. So, I think people need to look at a little bit more of a historical framework, understand that we're breaking through that disease entity model, and no matter how you approach doing your thing, the lifestyle factors are the foundation of what has to happen in our day to day, because we need to work on health span more than lifespan. And for most people in our culture, the last 20 years of their lifespan is not health span. It's not health promoting. They're living in a state of disability, drug dependency, and so on and so forth. But by embracing these lifestyle factors, and you can call it lifestyle medicine, we realize that not only can we prevent major issues, we can reverse major issues that have occurred, but we still need a more fundamental framework where we highlight the vitality of the human being. Because that old disease entity model, when you had symptoms, you were brought up, we were all educated to fear our own vitality. So that when we had a fever or a symptom, we needed to attack that out of existence, or we needed to do something, or take a supplement, or take something that could somehow shift that action, when in fact that action was the only thing you had going for you. And so we were brought up to fear. In fact, I'm going to talk about this at the conference coming up. We were brought up to fear our own vitality. And in a step in that process, we became disengaged from the true power that operates within each of us. And so I love what's happening. I just would love it to kind of bring into play more of the philosophical framework that has to really be the foundation to dictate what's going to happen next.
Hmm. I love that you brought this up because it's so central, and reverberating in my head is something that I heard in natural hygiene when I was barely more than a kid. The body is a self-healing mechanism when given the needs of life and otherwise left alone. And that has just stayed with me for so long. And because it's so much in me, I forget that most people are coming from that other direction. So you mentioned Dr. Frank conference. So this is the National Health Association conference?
Yes, Jayney and I will both be attending that. It's going to be the end of this month, and yeah, and it's a wonderful 4-day event. You've been there, you've lectured
Yeah,
there.
yeah. So we're
Yeah,
talking,
so we're going to have, yeah, so it's great. So the doctors all doing this work gather. There's wonderful, educational information, but more importantly, it's a community gathering, and that is really what people need. Because a
Mm.
lot of times, now especially online, and there's a lot of disconnection that can occur. So having these events, which are now fewer and kind of farther between, where you're getting 300 to 400 people coming together, living the same way, sharing their lives. There's something very powerful about that, that even transcends the educational information that's being shared.
So we will put in the show notes the National Health Association. The National Health Association is what has come to us through the former American Natural Hygiene Society. So
Right.
some of these ideas that Dr. Frank is talking about live there.
And
So
you can buy it virtually, so you could do it at home if
that's
you get,
right.
and it's very inexpensive. It's like less than $100 to do the whole weekend at home.
Okay,
So
so we're
it's great.
talking June 2026 if you're
June
listening live.
25th to June 25th to the 29th, like that window right there.
Okay. Okay, cool. And I'm also going to put in the show notes a podcast that we did with Gene Schumacher, whom I believe is considered the historian for the National Health Association, where we talked about some of these historic figures
Right.
in natural hygiene. That if you like history and if you like to know where things came from, you'll find that of interest. So, Janie, how did you meet this man? And how did you guys know you were so compatible?
We got set up, we got fixed. Yes, a very, very dear mutual friend. She facilitated an introduction.
Victoria knows her, Bethany Vino.
Oh, there you are. Yes, our very dear friend Bethany. Yeah, wonderful lady. And so neither Frank nor I were looking for anybody at the time. And she was very clever. Bethany was very clever. She gave me some. I was staying at Hippocrates at the time, funnily enough, and she gave me some DVDs of his. And I thought, oh well, begrudgingly, all right, okay, I'll watch these. And of course, I was blown away. I just thought, wow, okay, this man not only knows what he's talking about, but he's pretty easy on the eye as well. Always a good thing. And anyway, she was sort of saying, "Oh, you should meet him." And he was saying to you, wasn't she was saying to you, wasn't she, Frank, that you should meet this woman because I've been chatting with Bethany, and I think she felt that I was somewhat credible, which is always nice. And so she engineered this meeting, and we just clicked. I don't know, energy, chemistry, sort of intellectual sparring. I don't know quite what it was, but it was something that just really, really clicked into place. Do you think that's a fair assessment, Frank?
It's kind of, you're underselling it a little bit. What happened with Bethany was up, they were both at Hippocrates doing a health program, their own individual programs. And Janie is really one of the most affable, loving, supportive people. So she would be flitting about, answering questions, counseling people while she's dealing with her own health issues and so on. And Bethany said to me, "You have got to come," because I was going to go up and visit Bethany. She was staying at the place. She said, "You have got to meet this woman." And I was kind of like, yeah, okay. And then she told Janie, "You've got to meet this doctor friend of mine." And Janie was like, "Great, one more pompous doctor." And so we kind of met, and then we were at an interesting place in both of our lives where we then just pursued the communication, and then it led to us being together. And right at this time, this day, so what are we at? What's today's date?
It's the 10th of
Yeah,
June.
so tomorrow we met 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
that's
when Janie comes in, we'll be spending our anniversary time together.
beautiful. So I would like to hear from each of you one thing in this whole health realm, physical, spiritual, wherever you want to take it, that you have learned from the other one.
Let Janie start.
Oh, cheers, thanks. What have I learned from Frank? Right, okay. Wow, that is such an interesting question, Victoria. I think really, Frank is so inspirational. on so many levels. And I don't just mean, nutritionally and, his viewpoint about health and science and so on. But as a person with his compassionate approach to life, to the people he works with, to his family. He is just extraordinary. And I think having a Frank in your life is a very, very, very lucky and wonderful thing, because his love, kindness, and compassion really does spill over, and it really changes lives. And I truly think that, my life is so enhanced astronomically, by an order of magnitude, whatever that is, just by having Frank in my life, by knowing him as not just my partner, but as my friend. Really is my best mate. So yeah, that's pretty special, isn't it? Especially as we're doing this, sort of 4,500 miles apart, and relying on flights to get to see each other. But yeah, it works. We make it work.
Yeah, it's amazing how you can meet somebody um, kind of from a different culture, separated by 4,000 miles and a common language, basically. But the bottom line is, meeting somebody that understands all your references. We have so much in common in relationship to film and writing, and we both played music professionally, and so many different things of that ilk that just kind of like resonated when we met. But one of the things that was really most important to me. Jayney has written about this too. She has been through some major health crises in her life where she experienced some of the most horrific pain of anybody that, frankly, I've ever been up close and personal with. And she has never, and I say this, with utmost gratitude and connection. I have never seen, she taught me how to so existentially embrace the moment that you're in, because she's been through life and death circumstances and so on, and nothing daunts her. She continued with her work and continued helping people and writing and running a business and doing all the things that she does. And at times it just blows me away when I think about it, and how much it affected me to just see this existential way of embracing life and not letting these other things deter you from the things that are most important to the expression of your heart and mind and soul. And that was, and in that regard, she may be the most impressive person that I've ever met. And of course, aside from being beautiful and brilliant and all of that. And so, falling in love with her and being in love with her has been life changing and transformative for me. And in many ways, it saved my life to be able to have this kind of connection with her.
Oh,
Oh,
that is really beautiful. So
thank you, Frankie. That's beautiful.
I just want to ask about illness, um, being not quite right, coming up with a diagnosis that's not expected. I believe that in the plant-based movement, we have a history of people feeling very intimidated. They get a diagnosis and they feel like, I can't tell anybody because it'll be bad for the animals. It'll be bad for the movement. And yet, we're all mortal. What do you guys have to say about that?
Can I go ahead, Frank, and I'll
Yeah,
I'll
please,
give you
please.
my yeah. So I have several autoimmune conditions, but the one that's really noticeable is rheumatoid arthritis. And I had my prognosis was very, very, very poor, because all of my joints were affected, except for my spine. So that was lucky, but everything else was affected. And normally, with a diagnosis like that, the prognosis is that you'll probably live about 5 years after diagnosis, and that was 36 years ago. So, clearly, clearly that prognosis was a load of old rubbish. But it has been a tough time. I've had times where, for example, I was 10 years in a wheelchair, fully just fully reliant on other people. It was a very, very difficult time. At my worst, I was in hospice care, not expected to make it. And I have been left with a legacy of joint deformity in my hands, which are, of course, very noticeable. I tend to talk with my hands, and I tend to talk with my hands anyway. But you'll see, my hands they're not straight. And when I'm up there on the stage and I'm speaking, I have had people more than once, several times afterwards, come up to me and say, well, if what you do really works, how come you haven't been able to fix yourself? Or the other thing that happens a lot are unsolicited suggestions, recommendations and so on. And it really it can be quite frustrating because you don't always have the time to say, well, actually, I've done really rather well because, that was the prognosis. And I was in a wheelchair for 10 years, told I'd never ever walk again. And then this, but then you don't have time to go on into all of that. And actually, neither should you. I tend to feel that as representatives, for want of a better word, but people advocating for veganism and for animal rights and compassion and all of the things that we care so deeply about. I think the thing to do is just accept that people will sometimes, because they have things themselves that they are struggling to deal with, they are projecting that they perceive as their own shortcoming, even subconsciously. They tend to project it onto a person and say, oh, well, look, see, none of this works. It's all mumbo jumbo. But I think that says more about them than it does about us. And the movement, for example, if Victoria, just to finish off this thought, you were saying what are things like in the UK? On the vegan front, we are so lucky. You can get vegan treats. Obviously, your beautiful fruit and veg very, very cheaply in all supermarkets because we don't have this disparity between meat and dairy subsidies like you do in the States, and then agricultural sort of fruits and so on all become very expensive. So we don't have that. So eating well is very inexpensive, probably the most inexpensive way of working. But then vegan treats, we have some amazing cheeses and all the various things that people, when they're transitioning, may feel that they miss. So it's very, very easy now for people to do the vegan transition. Our Veganuary is going from strength to strength. And we have so many vegan advocates who are really high profile, particularly, Michelin star chefs and so on, who are really pushing the animal advocacy side of things. So we're very lucky here. Yeah.
Yeah, I look at it a little bit differently because I don't know where this model came that people think that perfection is really the outcome. It's really what I'll call probability versus perfection, meaning that we now know that by doing the things that we're recommending, there is a really significant probability that more positive outcomes will occur. So you will have less risk of developing this or that or whatever. Doesn't say that you'll have no risk. And the fact of the matter is, life is a constellation of factors that some are in our control and some are not. And some of the things that are not may be environmental stressors of various kinds, or stresses that we feel we can't immediately overcome or change. So we have to adapt to them. So there are a wide range of things that go just beyond the food choices that we're making. And I think people have created this reductionist approach that everything centers just around food itself. There was a time in the past where I refused to lecture on nutrition for a few years because everybody just made everything food. And I knew that there were factors of stress and there were factors of other concerns related to sleep and physical activity and things that were really being dramatically overlooked. So the bottom line is, living this way doesn't say you will never get ill. It just says that if you do what we're talking about, the probability will be less. But if you do develop it, there'll also be a probability that you'll have a better opportunity to heal that in a more judicious and timely manner. I have a history going back of everything from drug abuse to choices and things that, created a wide range of dysfunctions and changes in my own body. I take the other side of the coin. If I didn't live this way, I never would have made it to where I am, regardless of what symptoms I may manifest now. The fact that I'm going on 76 and I take no drugs, have not seen a physician for who knows how many years, I attribute to this entire way of living. So the food choices, the vegan approach, the high quality plant food, but also my physical activity, also my emotional and spiritual support that I create within my own work, meditation, Tai Chi, whatever, my relationships with family and with my lovers and people that are close to me. So I think we need to abandon this idea that, oh my God, if I'm not manifesting perfection, I don't want to share my life because everybody thinks that they're looking, look, people, misery truly loves company. So many people do not feel capable or desirous of making these kinds of changes. So they're so quick to try to bring somebody down that has made those choices and maybe has not manifested perfection. I think we need to get past all that. I think we need to love ourselves a little bit more and realize that life is much more complicated than that. It is a constellation of factors, some of which we can control, some of which we can't, and we do the best that we can in the face of that. And whether I get ill, whether I get cancer, whether I lose my mind, or whether I explode down the block, the fact that I could create a quality of life where every one of those years has been living in a maximum health span kind of way, where I've had my autonomy and my ability to function and blah, 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 all of that, I would attribute to that lifestyle. And when we talk about the lifestyle or sell that lifestyle, that's what we're really selling. The probability that you will be able to really enjoy the moments and years of your lives, regardless of whatever pathology, disease, or change you may manifest. And if they manifest, as you have shared with me, Jayney, as you have showed me, how do we really live and embrace those moments? I always tell people, I was at a lecture once with this Buddhist monk, and it was a great talk. I loved it. And at the end, I went up and chatted with him. And he had a book, which I got, and I asked him to inscribe it. And he wrote the best inscription that anyone has ever written, that I've ever seen. And he said, "May you live every moment of your life." That was his inscription in the book. And so I try to share that with people because a lot of times, when we talk about health and well-being, we share all this incredible information. And then I'll have people and I'm telling them all the ways they can live longer and live better. And then sometimes the feedback will be to me, well, why do I want to do that?
Mm.
I mean, why do I really want to live any longer? My life is shit. This is not how I'm not. And so there's so many other pieces to this story that we need to get away from this feeling that if I'm not manifesting perfection, I'm going to hide in the corner because then it's going to undermine the life and people are not going to embrace what I'm doing, rather than saying, you know what, this lifestyle has kept me alive while at the same time I've been supporting every other creature in life on this planet and the planet itself. There is nothing you can do better than that. That extension, that true spirituality of understanding that the choices that we make have repercussions far beyond the borders of our own skins into the life and people around us and the creatures around us and the planet around us. So none of that changes, no matter how sick I get. So whether I make a vegan choice, when I make a choice that's supporting all of that and I get cancer, pardon my language, who gives a crap? The truth of the matter is that's part of a bigger picture of life. It's not about perfection. And then while in the midst of my own dismay, in the midst of my own lack of ease, I'm still making choices that are supporting all of that other spiritual connection. How cool is that?
About as cool as you. This is Why I am such a fan. Oh my goodness. So I said that I would talk a little bit about these URLs and where you can find these amazing people. So let's see. We'll start with Dr. Frank. The book, again, is Weightless: Compassionate Weight Loss for Life. You can find that wherever books are sold. Now, that wonderful retreat that I mentioned, it's in South Florida, Deerfield Beach. And correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Frank, it's not 365 days a year. There are certain times when this is
We do it a
available,
week. We do it a week a month.
1 week a month.
Yeah,
Okay.
and if you go on the website, we have all of the dates published for those weeks.
Okay. So that way, that website is healthfulliving.oceanretreat.com.
That's it.
And you can find him on Instagram at Dr. Frank Sabatino. I will put all of this in the show notes at mainstreetvegan.com. And now I'm going to tell you some more stuff about Jayney. You can find her on um, Facebook, Complementary Medical Association, on Instagram, complementary.med.association, and elsewhere. Again, it'll be in the show notes. Her own website is jayneygoddard.org. That's JAYNEYGODDARD.org, or for the Complementary Medical Association, the-cma.org.uk, and the wonderful book Rewind Your Body Clock, also available on all of the online booksellers, and an actual bookshop can order all of these things for you, just as if you're getting your books from a couturier. So, as I mentioned, the show notes at mainstreetvegan.com. I do want to give a shout out for Main Street Vegan Academy. We will be doing our 39th cohort this fall. And
No.
one of the incredible instructors at Main Street Vegan Academy is Dr. Frank Sabatino. When he's got the time, we get him for 2 classes because he is one of the absolute favorites of all the students, because he brings all of this evidence-based information with the foundation and the background of the history and the spirituality and the even quantum physics aspect of what it really means to be a whole human being on this planet. So, at Main Street Vegan Academy, we're starting to call it Main Street Vegan Coach Training Academy, so we're clear. It's not a place to come to learn how to be vegan, but our trained coaches can sure help you learn how to be vegan. This is for vegans who want to up their game, for people who want to become coaches, educators, entrepreneurs, start a business, maybe get a job with a plant-based company or an animal rights organization. Our graduates are doing all of these things. The course is on Zoom, but it's live on Zoom. Yeah, it's recorded if you have to miss a day. But what's different about Main Street Vegan and pretty much anything else that I know that's out there is you are one-on-one with our wonderful instructors like Dr. Frank Sabatino. He is one of the instructors who is part of our Facebook group that you will be part of as a graduate. He gives his PowerPoints that you can actually have as your very own and study. And many of our other instructors, Dr. Milton Mills, Chef Fran Costigan, a dietitian, Marty Davy, the Our Hen House women, Jasmine Singer, and Marianne Sullivan, wonderful animal rights attorney. I mean, we've got the best of the best, and they see you. This is the kind of course where you're there. You can ask your questions live. And frankly, what you also get is me. I have no grandchildren, but I have graduates. And if you are one of my graduates and you need an endorsement for your book, because a lot of our graduates write books, if you need a connection, you don't want to abuse that. You don't want to ask me to meet 20 people. But if you really need a connection to Dr. Frank or somebody else, I'm going to be there to do that for you. It's really an extraordinary experience, and I can pretty well promise that it will change your life. So check us out, mainstreetvegan.com. Now, getting back to my wonderful guests for this incredible episode, you have both written and spoken a lot about the aging process and maturing in a healthful way. So, since that's the topic of your wonderful book, Jayney, let's start with you. Give us a little bit of context for going from young to what comes next.
Right. Okay. Lovely. Thank you, Victoria. Yes. So the premise, I suppose, of the book is that we have so much more control over the future of our health and our aging process than most people could possibly imagine. So I wrote the book for a lay audience, although it is equally applicable. I know a lot of doctors that have got it and read it and appreciated it as well. So it's designed to be very sort of user friendly, and the a lot of really astonishing. I wanted to highlight some of the really astonishing findings about things that keep us young, vibrant, healthy, and happy. Things like volunteering, socializing, the little bits and pieces that people don't actually ever take into account that can really actually move the needle on our biological age. So obviously biological age being different from chronological age. So chronological age is our age in years, biological age is how we measure. And the reason that I wrote this book was because when I was very, very, very poorly in hospice care, I had all sorts of people coming in, all sorts of industry, complementary integrative medicine field friends coming in and saying, "Oh, try this, do this," and I was okay, come on, guys, And but I did actually, I was scanned for biological age at that particular point, and then again shortly after that point. And I was scanning at much, much older than my chronological age. So I thought, well, that's not very good. What can I do about this? How can I sort this out? So that's what really took me on this quest to look at ways of actually halting and reversing the diseases that we wrongly associate with being a natural part of the aging process. All those illnesses, heart disease, kidney disease, things like everything ranging from cataracts to type 2 diabetes to the cancers and so on that we see cropping up as people, more frequently as people get older. And the truth of the matter is that all of these illnesses have a common denominator underlying them, of course, which is chronic inflammation. That's just part of the story. Obviously, this is a quick précis, really. But if we can at least take steps to, modify our inflammatory response. So my little cat's just come to visit. So you'll see little Opal here. She's very friendly and she's one of my rescue family. Yeah, so I really wrote that book with various things in mind to share the sort of the basics. This is the very basics of what we can do to mitigate our future health risk and to improve health span outlook for the future, but then also to incorporate some of the extraordinary researchers out there, people like Professor Ellen Langer, and then of course you've got the extraordinary researchers who discovered telomeres and telomerase, so Elizabeth Blackburn and Alyssa Appel, and so on. And these are people who are doing the most amazing work out there and doing life-changing, life-saving stuff. And they rarely get name checked. So it's quite interesting. I wanted to bring all of that into the mainstream as well, Victoria. So yeah, so that's sort of what, that was the passion project. And actually, the book was serialized twice by the Daily Mail. And it did incredibly well. And I think it was the right thing at the right time because it went on to the Amazon charts at #1 of all books on Amazon. So I was shocked, really, really shocked. But I think it was because the Daily Mail had grabbed it on and publicized it on their publication. So I think it was the trajectory of sales rather than anything else necessarily. But yeah, it's done well, and people have said that it's really helped them. So that's really all I need. That as long as it's doing a service out there.
Well, Jayney, talk a little bit about the practical things, though. List a few of those things because you write about novelty and awe and movement. List a few of the things practically because I think they'll be important to people.
Yes, absolutely, Frank. Of course, I do talk about a whole food plant-based SOS-free diet, which I think is crucial for all of us. But then we've got things like appropriate exercise, sleep, stress response management. So we can't control the stressors in our lives, but we can control the way that we respond to them. We can improve things like sleep with things like yoga nidra recordings. So I've got a lot of exciting bits and pieces, free downloads on my website that people can, hit the site and download all of these goodies if they want to look at things a bit more deeply. But really strange things, like, for example, I don't know if our viewers and listeners will know that if you take time out to create yourself a little playlist of the music that you listened to when you were a teenager, now this comes from Professor Ellen Langer at Harvard, you can what happens is, of course, your body can't tell the difference about whether you're actually magically back there at the point where your hormonal response was at its peak. So we can actually do certain strategies like this that are really neat and really fun. One of Langer's most amazing studies that she did this immersion study where, and she repeated it several times, but initially it was where she took a bunch of older gentlemen and put them in a house that was designed to be exactly what the environment would have been like 20 years prior. So when these men felt they were at their peak, mentally, emotionally, sexually, or physically, everything. And just after a week in this immersive house, I think it was a 1940s house that she did the first experiment with. So they had the most extraordinary responses. But Michael Mosley and Professor Langer did a BBC program. It's called The Young Ones, and they took a load of stars who were household names, they'd all sort of retired. And what had actually happened was that she realized that they were all at their peak, or so they thought, in the 1970s. So she created a 1970s house with all the psychedelic wallpaper and the music coming out of the radio, what was on television, the newspapers. They'd opened the cupboard in the kitchen, all the foods from the 70s and so on. But the extraordinary thing was, Victoria, that after a week in this house, just 1 week, blood pressure had improved, flexibility had improved, height had improved. And it's extraordinary, isn't it? Blood sugar had improved, just general functionality and fitness. And they had all of these wonderful, very, very good, very well established ways of measuring all of these changes. Even eyesight had improved. So I have a little thing on the site again, funnily enough, again, it's free for people to use, which is you can actually check your own biological age progression. It won't give you, these exercises and tests won't give you a biological age, but what they will do is help you track your progression. Are you getting biologically older or younger? And so the idea is that people will go through my 21-day reset program in the book, and then they'll start to see that their biological age is tracking down on all of these different measurements. So yeah, so that was really the premise of the book, was what can we do to actually move the needle in our favor from a health span perspective.
Beautiful. Dr. Frank, you want to finish us up?
Yeah, let me just I'll make it simple. In the late 1980s, I was very fortunate to be part of a research program that was at the time the largest aging research center pretty much in the United States and maybe in the world. And that was at the University of Texas Health Science Center. And they pioneered the work on calorie restriction and aging. So they were they extended work that had gone on many years before by taking rats in this case and realizing that when they took rats and reduced their calorie count by about 40% and allow them to do all the things that they do, all their rat-like things, the animals on restricted calories lived 50% longer. So it was a remark that would be like us adding 40 years to our lives by restricting calories. So and again, when they do calorie restriction studies, you can appreciate that they're giving these animals supplements so they don't have nutrient deficiencies when they take calories away. But this idea that you could just restrict calories to extend this incredible amount of lifespan blew the mind of all scientists. So they started to say, well, how could that be? What was really happening? And what they started realizing is that there were a few underlying things that were mechanisms that seemed to be the case. One was, as Jayney mentioned, they had significantly less inflammation, number one. Number two, they had much less generation of what are called free radicals, which are these reactive oxygen molecules that are produced when we eat a lot of processed foods or we're exposed to smoking, pollution, all those kinds of things. And when we're eating animal products and ultra processed foods. And what happens is if you don't create enough antioxidants to get rid of those free radicals, you develop an imbalance of those free radicals that's called oxidative stress. So chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, the production of compounds that were called advanced glycation end products, where protein and sugar were merging to create these toxic chemicals that would cause premature aging. So they came up with 3 or 4 models. What I found interesting is that when I left that work and I started looking at people eating a vegan plant-based approach, especially with physical activity and other lifestyle factors, those eating habits and those lifestyle factors were generating all of the mechanisms that these scientists had discovered were working when animals restricted calories to live longer. So without even calorie restriction, by performing these basic lifestyle features and factors, it actually feeds a process, as Jayney said, of slowing down biological age, regardless of whatever age you are chronologically. So you can be fairly old at 40 and fairly young at 60, depending on how much you ratchet down these mechanisms of what I'll call the damage hypothesis. What's causing damage? Chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, lipid peroxidation, part of oxidative stress, cooking oils, fragmented oils, different things like that, ultra processed foods, but increasing physical activity, reducing stress or modifying your stress response, restorative sleep. We now know that all of those lifestyle factors, old hygienic factors, were actually ratcheting down all of the mechanisms that became most dominant in the work of all the scientists doing aging to slow down the aging process. So you don't need to do anything but start bringing those choices into your life. How can you exercise more readily? How can you work on emotional poise, whatever that may be for you, whether that's meditation or yoga or whatever? How can you start eating in a way that ratchets down inflammation and increases antioxidants, which is purely simply a whole food plant approach? So it's interesting that it kind of gave me an aha moment that, wow, those deep cellular mechanisms that were involved in slowing or extending lifespan are the very things that are actually being set in motion by the lifestyle that we're promoting. And so you don't need any kind of sophisticated injections and this and all the things that go on in this aging field where we're trying to reverse aging with these incredible manipulations of hormones and so on and so forth, while overlooking the basic cellular mechanisms that can be promoted to our best advantage by just living the way that we teach.
I love it. And I love you, both of you. Thank you so, so very much for all of this inspiration and information. So let's see. Backing up, I did forget when I was talking about Main Street Vegan Academy to give you the code for podcast listeners. That is VegCoach250. That will save you $250 on your registration for the 2026 Main Street Vegan Academy program. And do check out the show notes. We want to look at both of these wonderful books, Weightless by Dr. Frank Sabatino and Rewind Your Body Clock by Jayney Goddard. So thank you to my 2 guests, and thank you to all of you for being with us today. Now, let us just get ourselves out there and make Main Street vegan.